Erev Tov, good evening. On behalf of the Synagogue Council Board of Directors, it's my honor to welcome you this evening to our program, Attracting and Engaging Millennials, that we have just identified as not millennials because they will be 20s and 30s. This is the plan for our evening together. First, I'll introduce you to our panelists in alphabetical order. Each of these distinguished rabbis has a proven track record of success. Following introductions, I have a number of questions for them, and if there's time, we'll answer your questions too. Since we're expecting a large group, please remain muted throughout the program and use the chat to share your questions. Rabbi Elizabeth Bonney-Cohen was ordained from Hebrew College in 2018, and she became Kehillat Israel's assistant rabbi and director of outreach and innovation after 2 years as their rabbinic intern. She is alumna of the Wexner Graduate Fellowship and Hillel International's Office of Innovation Fellowship for Rabbis. She is married She is an alumna of the Wexner Graduate Fellowship and Hillel International's Office of Innovation Fellowship for Rabbinic Entrepreneurs. She holds a BA from the William Jewell College in Religion, Philosophy and Gender Studies, and Human Sexuality, and an MDiv from Yale Divinity School, and an MJED from Hebrew College. Originally from Overland Park, Kansas, she now lives in Brookline with her husband, Matt, their son, Maor, and their daughter, Tziona. Rabbi Jen Gubitz is the founder of Modern Jewish Couples, which supports couples on the pathway to marriage and beyond, and serves as an educator at Temple Shalom of Newton. A student of Musar and Midrash, Jen's rabbinate is committed to elevating Jewish wisdom's capacity to speak to our human condition. Her welcoming vibe weaves learning, ritual, and life cycle experiences full of music, poetry, honesty, and humor. Rabbi Gubitz is a graduate of the Bourne's Jewish Studies program at Indiana University and was ordained in 2012 by Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York, where she was a Tisch Rabbinical Fellow and wrote her thesis on Jewish death education for children. She recently completed an MBA-level entrepreneurship certificate program through Columbia Business School and Glean Network, and is currently completing an intensive certificate in family systems therapy with therapy training at Boston. She directed the Riverway Project in Boston from 2016 to 2021. Rabbi Claudia Kreiman is a senior rabbi at Temple Beth Zion in Brookline, and the first Chilean-born woman to be ordained to the rabbinate. Rabbi Kreiman's love for Judaism, combined with her experience growing up under the repressive Chilean dictatorship, forged her passion for social justice. Rabbi Kreiman, ordained in Jerusalem, became the first rabbi of Noam, the Masorti youth movement in Israel. Rabbi Kreiman is deeply committed to inspiring impactful work towards social justice and to experiencing meaningful and joyful prayer. In addition to leading TBZ, Rabbi Kreiman is widely involved in the local and national Jewish community, serving on numerous boards, including JCRC of Greater Boston, Trua, and others. She also serves and supports interfaith organizations, including the Brookline Clergy Association and Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. She is married to Rabbi Eben Leder, who is on the faculty of the Rabbinical School of Hebrew College. They have 2 daughters, Alma and Ariel. And finally, I'm sad to report that Rav Chazan Elisa Berger of Temple Emmanuel Newton sincerely regrets that she could not be with us this evening. We wish her well. So rabbis, thank you so very much for being with us this evening. Let's start the conversation. What do we need to know about millennials in order to serve them? Or what do millennials need and how do you find out? And once again, a millennial for our purposes.
I will say one word and then I'll pass it to my 2 colleagues who are millennials, because I am not a millennial. Because what we have to do is to listen. We have to listen to what they want and what they need. So I will pass it to Rabbi Gubitz and Rabbi Elizabeth Bonney-Cohen, because both of them are millennials and they can tell us what we need to learn.
I appreciate that, Rav Claudia. Absolutely listen and ask and notice. And I think there's an interpersonal way of knowing about millennials. And then there's also, the academic and the professional ways that we figure things out by looking at trends, by working with one another. So like Rabbi Bonney-Cohen and Rabbi Kreiman and I and Rav Chazan Berger, like we're all in touch with each other. And I think really mindful of how we support the community broadly. So collaboration is how we figure out how to serve them. But I think I am a millennial. I also have a younger sister who I often use as my pulse on life for people that are not rabbis, because rabbi millennials are different than other millennials where it's just a different relationship to Judaism. And so I think a lot about the fact that millennials are like many people living through liminal moments. They may have more debt than ever before. The world may be in worse shape than it ever has been. We have more access to social media than ever before, which also means that mental health is impacted significantly. We've also been through about 20 years of political strife, it feels like, not to diminish the fact that there have been many other generations that have experienced that. And I think, asking folks, what do you need? Where are you? How are you? And doing it through one-on-one relationship building is how I learn what folks as a community need, but really what individuals need. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I don't know that I can add so much more to it. I mean, I think this is going to be kind of a repeating trope that you hear from me and probably others throughout the evening, is the power of the one-on-one relationship. And there's no quick fix there's just no quick fix to snapping our fingers and being like, oh, if I just have the right program, all the people will show up. Like, that's actually not how this work is done. This work is really done in one-on-one relationship building. It is very tedious, it is very time intensive, and it is very rewarding. And I think that, the millennials that I talk to on a regular basis and that I experience myself, they want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to feel seen. Often a lot of them, I think it's not much different from the older congregants I serve also, who walk around with a sense of imposter syndrome in Jewish spaces, where they feel like, oh, I'm the one who knows the least in this space. And I feel a lot of insecurity and even shame around that. A lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis is reassuring people that they are worthy enough to be in this space and they are worthy enough to access their tradition, and just kind of reassuring folks. I'll say they also have like a pretty high BS read, and they just don't want to get the fluff. Like, they really want to engage in authentic connection. They want to see you fully. They don't just want to see the polished you. They want to see like that things are hard and that's okay. And Judaism has something to say to those moments. If we're talking 20s and 30s, there's a huge difference between engaging millennials who are single and looking for a partner, and feeling a lot of challenge and pain around that, especially young women. There's a huge difference, especially in the non-Orthodox spaces, a huge differential in terms of numbers of single females versus number of single males looking for partners. So loneliness is something that we encounter in a really deep way. And then you have people who have found their match and they're trying to figure out what it means to build a Jewish home with that partner. And that's a totally different set of factors, right? How do you interact with their extended family? What are at play in interfaith relationships that have, what are at play in Jewish relationships where people are coming from very different worlds in the Jewish world. So those are all different dynamics that are at play there. Then there are couples who are wanting to build a family and maybe are on fertility journeys that are not all happy and beautiful. And, you know, when they see their friends posting on Instagram these pictures of sonograms and whatever, that's a whole other kind of pain that people are feeling and often facing alone. And then you have young parents who have a whole other set of needs. You know, I myself, we just were talking, my husband just tested positive for COVID this morning. We have 3 kids, all under 5, so none of our kids are vaccinated. And our world is just about to go into a tailspin for who knows how long. Even if God willing, everybody's healthy, we will be in a particular kind of chaos. And you know, parents of young kids, I hope I don't have to tell you, have been under tremendous stress over the last 2 years, and figuring out ways to show up for them, I think, is so important, and also has been a huge point of neglect, I should say, or not even meaning neglect, but I think that we as Jewish institutions haven't shown up for them in ways that I think we should be right now. So I said I didn't have a lot to add, and then I just talked for a really long time. So I'm going to stop there, but I think that depending on what stage of life, not just what age people are, but what stage they are in life, makes a huge difference in terms of what they need and how we show up for them.
I'll add to what you're saying, Rabbi Elizabeth, and first of all, refresh them out to Matt, and hopefully won't be that a long journey. The last few weeks are too hard. Which I think, you know, Gretchen, you talk to this, like, to differentiate. So we're using the word millennial in a very kind of broad way, and millennial is actually 30s and kind of 40s almost, right? It's like, and I know that the idea is to also be thinking about 20s and 30s, like younger chevre, and a couple of you asked, like, okay, we want to listen and we want to be in one-on-ones, but how to bring them into the room? What I learned in my experience at TBZ in the last few years, and it took me a hard kind of ride, was like, actually, I need to welcome them and not expect them to be members of my congregation, which is a total different shift of how traditional synagogue structures think. We are always thinking about, like, I need to bring more members. I need to bring more members. So, and you know, we created a program. I think it's our musical Kabbalat Shabbat service. It's once a month. You want to come tomorrow? Tomorrow's Friday? No, 2 days. I have 2 days. It's this Friday, Shabbat Nariya, which brings people of many different generations, but a lot of young people. And when we started this, I think 6 years ago or so, or longer, the first question a lot of my board members were asking is like, so are they going to become members? Are they going to become members? And I said, I don't know. And that was the question. It's like, we decided to put resources for this program and spend time and money on this. And of course, as normal it is in Jewish organizations, the first question is like, what are we going to get back from this? And at some point I had to say to the board, chill out. They are not going to become members. They're not going to become members in the next year or 2 or 3. But we are going to engage them and bring them into our community and find our community to be an engaging place, a place they find safe and good and meaningful, and that speaks to their values and to what they want. And once they come here, they will become part of our community in some ways or in others. And some might become members and some might not. And that's okay. And I think there is a shift that I have to go through too, of like not imagining that the only way that they are going to be part of my community is if they are paying membership, if they are counted as members. Now, the good news is that 6 years later, we partner with Kavod House, which is an organization for 20s and 30s that focus on social justice. And we do this program with them and some other things. And we have never expected them to be members of TBZ. But let me tell you that every few months, there is someone in Kavod who has grown up from Kavod that is staying in the area that becomes a member of TBZ, or they asked me to do their wedding. And they asked me, I had today one, they asked me to do their wedding. Then I said, do I have to be a member for you to do our wedding? You have been part of our life through Naria for a long time. And I said, no, if I am available, I'll do it. And please keep coming. Will they become members? I don't know. But I have created a safe space for them to be part of meaningful and intentional community. And that is what brings them into the room. Then I can have the one-on-one. I can ask them, do you want to be a member? What do you need? What can I do for you? How can my community be your community?
So I'm a member of Rob Claudia's temple. So I just want to plug, some millennials do join, but I'm also thinking about the way, I think, Claudia, what you said about sort of just like if membership is a goal, which I understand for the bottom line very much is a concern for many of us, but I think we also have to shift our thinking about Jewish identity and belonging in general, which is to say that I think Jewish identity, I think we share this, is that it's a spectrum at this point, as is Jewish affiliation and belonging, which is to say that my sense of the way things are moving is that folks of all young adult ranges and humans in general will belong to the Jewish people, and that will take different shapes throughout their lives as it serves them. If they I live in Roxbury, so being part of Rav Claudia's shul makes a lot of sense for us. If we lived somewhere much further away, it wouldn't. But I think that what I'm hearing you say too, is that like we're investing in folks' participation and connection to the broader Jewish community, and sort of, it may not benefit your community's bottom line, but it will benefit the bottom line of the Jewish people. And I think that when we shift in that way, it feels like an investment in the future, no matter what.
That's huge. And again, and I'll just, we should let you ask questions, but I'll say, like, on that, like, I think that to Jen's point, like we do touch base with each other, and we refer people to each other's shuls and to each other's programming. And, I think we really have a collaborative spirit where we don't think like, oh, these are my people and I have to like hold on to them, because if I let them go somewhere else, then like, I'm never going to see them again. Like we don't feel protective in that way and defensive in that way. And instead really believe that this rising tide lifts all ships. And that like, if somebody's community is, if somebody comes to me and says like, I'm looking for like a beautiful Friday night experience, like I might tell them about our shul, but like really they should be at TBZ, and like, and I'm going to tell them that. And I think that like, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that I have to offer them, because I do. And I'm happy to continue, to engage with them in those ways. But if there are things that I can't offer in the same way, I'm not at all afraid to.
And if someone comes and says, I'm looking for a community that has a more traditional view of things, that have Shabbat dinners at home, that has something, I will send them to Rabbi Bonney-Cohen and to KI, because we are not offering that, right? So it is that collaborative that I think it's very important. And look, we are in Brookline, so we have to recognize our privilege of being in a very vibrant Jewish community where there are 5 or 7 synagogues walking distance, like between my house and KI. I walk through a lot of places, or after College Corner. So I know this is not the same for those of you guys that are in more suburban parts of the greater Boston community. So that is something to recognize, that it's a little different because we're in Brookline.
I'm actually wondering about that, because I've heard an assumption that synagogues in the suburbs are at a disadvantage for attracting millennials or 20s and 30s because they tend not to live in the suburbs. In your experience, will they travel in order to find activities of interest and warm and welcoming communities of faith?
I think there is a very logistical question, which is called having a public transportation. Like if we're talking about 20s and 30s, if people that like at TBZ, at KI, people can take the T, can walk. So there is something about a very logistical thing that is, it's interesting because our challenge, we don't have parking, right? So the older folks always says like, but no, TBZ is too complicated. There is no parking. So it is kind of the other side of the story. So, but I'm not, I don't, you know, I have not worked in a synagogue in the United States besides in Brooklyn. So I'm not sure what would be the answer for that. But Jen, you work beyond synagogue, so you can speak about that.
So my experience working in Boston / Brookline was that people would come into the city. I'm running a couples cohort right now at the Vilna Shul. That their experience is that folks will stay after work and then head home. I think a couple of other factors, knowing how Rabbi Bonney-Cohen sort of laid out the different like cohorts among the broader generation, for folks who are able to purchase a home, they are moving to the suburbs, but they are moving further out than some of us may like consider, sort of, you know, like they're moving beyond Natick and Newton and Framingham because of cost of living. Because it's quite prohibitive to buy in the city. So I do think they actually do move to the suburbs, although they may be in a different stage of life. So families with young children programming in suburban spaces can be really amazing. But I've had the experience that it's hard, but like if with a proof of concept experience or a trusted person, like I bet that people drive in to go to base where Rabbi Bonney-Cohen is. And I mean, if they have a car, they'll drive to a lot of places. If you can help them with parking, all the more so. But also, if people really want to be somewhere, those barriers are less of a barrier. If that, like, we go to Naria no matter what. Sometimes it's difficult to find parking, but like we know that, and we still want to be there. So I do think that, like, I think one of the possibilities for folks in the suburbs, though, is sort of, this may be a dated term, but third space Judaism. So ironically, I rent a church out to run a lot of programming because some folks say that young adults don't want to go to temples. So it's funny that I rent a church because it's still a house of worship. But Rav Chazan Eliza Berger and I do a monthly intergenerational, not just young adults, Havdalah singing experience, and it's in a church. And I think I used to do a lot of engagement in coffee shops when we could go to coffee shops, or walks, or running a Hanukkah program in an olive oil store. So finding ways to be proximate to young adults instead of hoping that they'll come to you, I think is another good strategy.
Thank you.
I wanted to, if it's okay, to, it's hard to follow all the comments, but Richard Alpert, about your question about if not membership is the goal, then we need a new model of funding. So I think it's not membership or yes membership. It's understanding the bigger pictures, because look, TVZ is getting new members because we open it up. It doesn't happen right away. It doesn't happen in the moment they come to this. I'm using just the example of one of our programs, Naria. We did not create Naria hoping that the 200, 300 people that come will become members. But when they decide, those who decide to settle close in Brooklyn and JP or somewhere in a manageable place, and they are settling and they are in that place, when they think about a community want to involve, they already have a relationship with us and they have a relationship with TBZ, and then they come and they are not coming from nowhere. So it is a more long-term kind of investment on building our community. It is knowing that I might not get their membership, quote unquote, when they're 20s or early 30s, but when they are starting a family, or when they got a job that feels, a job that they are settling in it, or etc., they will become part. Or for example, when it comes to high holidays, and they have been coming to this and they want to go somewhere for high holidays, and have been used to only go to their parents' high holiday in some different state, but they can't do that anymore because their job doesn't allow them to do that. Then they say, I love the shul on Friday nights once a month. Let's check how is Neila there, and let's go there. And then it becomes really a place where you feel at home. So it is having a more kind of long-term view of what does it mean to engage people in our community.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to reply to that?
I'll just say that I totally agree, and I think that if you are in a suburban space, I don't think it's so realistic to think that young singles are going to be driving out to the suburbs for a program. I just don't think it is, and I think that's okay. Like I think that you should say, who is in my community and how do we reach those people? So again, maybe to Jen's point, maybe you you have young families around that just aren't coming to shul, and so then you try to figure out what's a way that I can get people to come for one thing where I'm gathering their contact information, right? That's how I would do it if I were out, even if I were out in the middle of nowhere and I were trying to start up. If I decided that, or my community decided that I needed to reach the young people, what I would do is I would host a pretty low barrier event that I publicized in a big way and collected registration for, that included email addresses, phone numbers, and maybe even address if I could. It'd be great also to gather birthday information of kids. You can do all that kind of stuff. Let us send you something. People love to be sent something, even if it's something very small. We'll send you this tiny token of appreciation. But I would do a low barrier event. It might even be just a Sunday morning, meet up with at the playground or something like that. Come for muffins and muffins and Mishnah, whatever it is. You come up with some cute thing that will attract people, but you get their information, and then you go through and you one-on-one call every single person who's come to the event. You get time with them, not only on that phone call, but you say, I'd love to meet up with you. When's a good time? I can come to you. Make it as easy as possible. We can do it by Zoom. Start building those relationships one-on-one. And then once you have that relationship with that one family, it only takes a relationship with one individual or one family. And then you start to say, who else should I be talking to? You have friends, right? You have people in your orbit. Who else should I be talking to? What do they need? What would you like from us? If you're a community that has a lot of retirees, my gosh, maybe you could come up with I've thrown it around at our shul of having a rent-a-bubby system or something like that, where you have a volunteer system where your retired members would go into a house and be a post-bedtime babysitter for parents and let them go out on a date night, to start to build some of those communal relationships. That doesn't cost you anything, but it would mean the world to a young parent to be able to have that as a gift from the shul. So, all right, I'll stop there.
I would love to rent a bubby, so badly. That is I love that. That's brilliant.
I'm yours.
I want to add a couple of things that also I've seen people are asking about what is this Kabbalat Shabbat area we're talking. So I'll tell you in a minute. But before going to that, I just want to say that another thing that I think has been for TVZ a success, attracting people in the 20s and 30s and 40s and all ages in a way. We have grown a lot. During the pandemic, we grew 17% up membership, and we are getting new members weekly. It's beautiful. It's a lot of work. I'm exhausted, but it's a wonderful thing that it's happening in our community. And one it is because the two things that guide in a way our shul, there's a lot of things that guide our shul, but what I would put at the center that guide our shul, our community, and my rabbinate has been joyful and intentional worship. And the other one is work on social justice and really being relevant about our work. And I know this doesn't work for all synagogues, but that does attract the younger folks because we are really activists out in the world. And because we put that out there, that is the folks that it's bringing, both the younger folks and the older folks. It's people that are really, really, especially during the harder years, political upheaval that we have had in this country, and during COVID, a lot of our focus was not only inwards, which is very important, and taking care of our community and our members and learning together, etc., but also outward to the world and to our local community. We're very involved in Brooklyn stuff. And right now we have a big thing going on about housing, what is it called? I always forget, affordable housing in Brooklyn. So that our involvement around being Jewish and living Jewish life, it is in the concept, it is beyond just what is happening in the four walls of TBZ. Now, I recognize this is not the right path or the right model for every synagogue, and not every synagogue should be this way. But I think that that is also one of the reasons why a lot of young folks are coming to TBZ, because there are, if they have not found in Judaism a place where they want to be, they have found suddenly they find synagogues, and we're not the only one in town. There are many other ones and many others in the country that have encountered and found that connection between what does it mean to be Jewish and have the moral voice of Judaism to be amplified. So that also is part of what is happening that is what is happening at TBZ. Now, when you say babysitter, I have to say this that TBZ made sure we stopped it during pandemic. We just put it back like a week or two ago, made sure to offer childcare. Since I had my daughter's bat mitzvah was this past Shabbat, since my daughter was little one, I said, you want to bring more people my age, you want to bring my friends, my chevre, there needs to be childcare on Shabbat. And there need to be a changing table on the bathroom. The first time there was a changing table on the bathroom when my daughter was born 13 years. Before that,
not only in the women's bathroom, by the way.
Not only in the women's bathroom, also in the men's bathroom and in the gender non-conforming bathroom, right? And that is 14. I came to TBZ 15 years ago. And I said, we need a changing table, and we'll talk about it. As soon as Alma, my daughter, was born, a congregant donated a changing table. That changed everything. And when we did our remodeling the shul, the first thing was like, let's make sure, the same way that we made sure there will be elevators to every place, so the place will be accessible to people of all ages and all abilities, we made sure that all bathrooms will have changing tables. Because if you're a parent and in the middle of the service, your kid needs to change a diaper and you have to do it in the hallway, you don't come back to that shul. You don't. There's no way. And if you have to nurse or pump in the bathroom, you also don't come back. So we have a lounge, and people know they can use the lounge for pumping and for nursing. And during high holidays, we make that the pumping and nursing room. And during Shabbat, people know my office is open for pumping and nursing. Everybody knows that. And we talk about it, we articulate, we say, this is a place you can do this. And these are things that need to be said and articulated, because if I go to a place and I have to change a diaper in the hallway or pump in the bathroom, I'm never coming back. That's for sure. So I think those are things that are really important to have in mind when thinking about who we want to attract.
I think also, I was like, Rav Claudia, what you're saying about sort of how we welcome and how we talk about how we welcome is really important vis-a-vis young adults these days. So young adults, I'm really mindful that Fran Chertok is on this call and she knows all the data, and Karen McGinnity is on this call as well and is an expert in interfaith issues. But young adults increasingly are identifying with multiple identities vis-a-vis gender, religion, heritage, ethnicity, race. Many are children of interfaith families. In Reform contexts, many are also patrilineal. Many are curious or rediscovering Judaism. Perhaps they became B mitzvah when they were 13 and then pieced out after that, and they are returning maybe because they have a partner who's not Jewish, who has helped them reconsider the role of religion in their life. Many identify as spiritual but not religious. Many say they're cultural, which can mean that they like bagels, or it could mean that they're not so sure about God. And it's hard when when I work with couples, it's hard because I want to say interfaith couples are welcome, but that's not only the right word anymore. And so you end up sometimes when you're welcoming folks with this like paragraph of possible identities that people may hold, and it can seem verbose and unnecessary. And I think when people don't see their identity on there to the best of our ability, they may not feel included, which is a difficult balance to strike. So sometimes saying, or however you identify your relationship to Judaism, is an important sentence to say out loud, because especially if they can't see themselves within your congregational makeup or leadership, it might be harder to show up. I do recognize that certainly I'm a Reform rabbi, and I have ways that I am able to officiate and support couples from various backgrounds that all synagogue clergy are not able to do. But I also know that like I'm among colleagues who, whatever their capacities are to officiate and support these couples, do so well with love and welcome. And if they can't do it, they say, hey, Jen, can you help us bring this family or bring this person into Jewish life because they want to be part of our community. And so I think really just being honest about who and how we welcome can really help young adults, no matter where they fall in the cohort, feel seen and heard, and like genuine, that you really do want them there.
That was beautiful, Jen. And I love, especially like you are talking again about the collaborative, like what does it mean to reach out to colleagues? That's what we do when we're not sure where we stand on things. And to be honest, like when I'm asked about my stance around patrilineal or interfaith marriage, I talk about where I stand, what are my struggles, but I do it in a way that is that it is also, it's open, it's real, it's not defensive or pushing away. So you said it so beautifully. Because I know people are looking for also concrete things, and I talked about the changing table. I just want to say that other couple of things that we have at TVZ that have been like really good is we have in the back of the show, we have a play area. We have a rag, an Aleph bed rag and toys, and it's filled with people. And it's okay if there is noise. It is okay if there is noise. And at the end of services, we invite all these young parents with their little kids under a tallit, and we bless them. And that has created a lot of intergenerational relationships too. So there is also these expectations of what shul or services look like. That I know I brought that. I came from. I was a rabbi in Israel. I was a rabbi in Israel, and I'm from South America, but my training was in Jerusalem. And being in Israel, in so many synagogues where the kids are running around and they're making a lot of noise, etc. I came to the American synagogue, and I almost died when I saw that everything needs to be so silent and so solemn and so quiet. And if a child sings a little too loud, they are asked to walk away. And I made one of my first goals to change that. And it doesn't mean that children are running around and being rambunctious. Some of them are, but we educate the children and the parents to say when you need to step out, but it's lively, and then it brings more people and more friends. So it's a beautiful way to welcome and bring people in.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, you know, both in the infrastructure that Ref Claudia just talked about, which we also really encourage, you know, I think there are things you can even like write like cards that you can put in the pews, you know, to say that this noise is welcome. You can speak it from the bima, right? Like as you're giving a sermon and you hear a baby cry, to stop what you're saying and say, what a holy noise. I'm so grateful to hear that noise in this space. You know, like by saying that, you take this burden off of this parent who's like, oh my gosh, now I'm, you know, everybody's looking at me, and you invite everybody else to also see it as sacred. And I think that makes a big difference. Another thing that I'll say is, to think of places where you've encountered Judaism as really holy and places of real connection, and invite people there too. I'm biased because a lot of the work that I do with Base Boston is in our home. Obviously, COVID has shifted that in a big way. And as much as we possibly can, we get people around our Shabbat dinner table and we welcome people into our home, into our living room. We do Torah study in our living room, not at the shul, in our home. And I think that is such, people relate differently when they're in someone's personal home. They relate to each other differently. They relate to the space differently. They can begin to envision what their home is going to look like, their Jewish home could look like. They look at the books on the shelves and they start asking questions, and they see, the Judaica that's around your table. Like, whatever it is, it invites questions, it invites relationship and intimacy in a way that you will just never get at a Torah study in the library of your shul. And so for those who are able to do that, especially once, we're, God willing, in a better place with COVID, and it's easier to bring people into your home, to do so, because that's often where so many of us have genuine connection with Judaism. And that's what these people are looking for. Just like all of us, we're looking for that. And it might not happen in shul, it might not happen in services, at least not as the initial point of contact.
Another, I think, thing to consider along all of those lines is when we welcome someone, and I learned from a DEI consultant, Yavila McCoy, that I was saying something that I learned from being, a Jewish educator at Hillel, where we talked about our Jewish journeys, but that actually there are certain questions when folks enter our spaces or we even meet them for coffee, that when we ask them, we are alienating them unknowingly and unintentionally immediately by saying some of those sort of maybe Jewish geography assumptions like, oh, when was your bat mitzvah, or who was your rabbi, or did you go to camp? All of which assumes that they were born or raised Jewish, that they had access to many of the aspects of Jewish life that are very expensive. And so the way that it can feel like, can we ask them anything? Like there's a concern about offending young adults and cancel culture and all of that stuff. And so the two things I say to people are, I'm really glad to see you and what brings you here to this moment right now, which is actually me translating the Shehechianu. I'm so glad you're here in this moment right now. What brought you here? And then they get to tell me if they're Jewish or how they're Jewish or what or who and what they are. It means I can't play Jewish geography, but that's okay. I can play it somewhere else. And I know that we play that game because of our deep desire to find, I want to find more people who graduated from IU, Jewish studies, or went to my URJ summer camp in Indiana. Like I love those moments. But by asking questions that have less assumptions in them, we allow people to show up how they want to be seen in that moment, especially when it's not necessarily a deep relationship quite yet.
So people are actually asking for us to step back. And how do we find people to bring to that moment, to ask these really powerful questions?
Can you
I think
say
you
that?
just ask them. Sorry, you ask your question again.
Oh, my question is, first, I sincerely appreciate Jen's honesty about how we ask questions and how we engage people, and that our default to go to Jewish geography can be really alienating. But I wanted to step back and say, how do we find the people to ask? What are our strategies for finding the 20-somethings and 30-somethings in order to engage them in the questions, to have the cup of coffee, to bring them to our Shabbat table or to our living room to study Torah or to our Purim carnival or what have you? Where do we find them? How do we find them?
So it may be that some of them grew up in your congregation, your community, and are moving back home or moving somewhere nearby. It may be that you try something wild, like go sit in a coffee shop with a sign that says, Rabbi, ask here for questions. Just try it, see what happens. Doing sort of like office hours in a public space that congregants are invited to as well. I have what I call an elevator ministry. So like, I feel like I run into people with spiritual questions everywhere. So I think it's possible to strike up certain conversations even in the grocery store line. I do think that if you have realtors in your congregation, they may be able to there probably is like the real estate version of HIPAA laws, but they may be able to identify families or folks that have moved to town. And the other thing, which I think causes us grief, is that they may not be living near you. And it may not be an opportunity. Maybe there's a demographic that is there, as someone pointed out, like, older adults who have more free time and are paying dues and really looking to be engaged. Maybe that's where you need to invest your time. That doesn't mean you'll never have young adults or young families, but it may just be that that's not the demographic where your community is. But I say, like, I don't know, throw spaghetti at the wall, go sit at a bar, or, go to Whole Foods with matzah and like stand with the gluten-free matzah and some other bougie Passover goods and see what happens. Or other open space Judaism.
Because you said something about sit in a bar, I'll put something that I've learned in the last few years. So one is that, yes, we often have I thought that if we offer alcohol, we will bring the young folks and the older folks. And those of you who come to TBC know that I always have good bourbon and scotch to offer. And that's one thing. And at the same time, a couple of weeks ago, we had a Shabbat that focused on, blanking on the word now. Jen, help me.
It was a recovery Shabbat.
Recovery Shabbat, thank you. A recovery Shabbat when we brought someone to talk about recovery and what does it mean to be a community that is aware and mindful that there is people in different levels of recovery and addiction. And we spoke about what does it mean to have a synagogue that both can have good schnapps during Kiddush, and we did it on Rosh Chodesh Adar, 2 weeks before Purim, Yom Kippur, 2 weeks before Purim, when we were going to have some great lechaims for the community, but also creating and speaking and articulating the fact that people suffer of different kind of addictions, and that is also that people that are with addiction and recovery, all kind of recoveries, are welcome and part of our community. And how can we hold all that it's part of holding the nuance, the complexity of identities, of people's journeys and people's stories. That is, and that created a conversation, and we have a follow-up conversation this week of people in our community that are in a journey of recovery and addiction to create safe space in our community. So it's another example of recognizing that there's no one solution for everybody. Alcohol will not bring you everybody. Alcohol will alienate some people. So you have to be careful. There is no a one for all. And this is not only true about 20s and 30s and millennials. This is true about human beings, humanity, right? And that is an important thing to also remember.
Yeah, I'll say that I'm seeing, like I see in the chat, just like a lot of anxiety about like, how do you find people, but how do you find people? And I appreciate that so much. And like, I think that like we've said it, it's a hard thing to hear because there isn't this easy solution, right? It's not that you can have just like, okay, I'm going to have a totally amazing Purim party. And then like, I'm just going to like all of a sudden have all the people. Like, that's not actually how this works. And I think that like, if you find, like I said, if you find one person who is in the demographic that you're looking to expand, one person and build a real relationship with them, invite them to be a chavruta and to do some learning together, or, take them to coffee. And at the end of that coffee, say like, I'd love to do this again. Could we meet up in a couple of weeks and just continue the conversation and build a real relationship with them? And then slowly begin to invite them to help with different things and invite them to introduce you to some of their friends. This is a process that takes a lot of time and a lot of attention. And And that's how you do it. And then it becomes word of mouth, right? Like at this point, people come to me seeking out my programming. I don't have to, I'm still like constantly looking for people. I love how Jen was talking about like an elevator rabbit. Like I feel that, like I see people on the street all the time, and I'm standing in line at CVS, and all of a sudden I like have invited somebody to our dinner table. Like that's just how this works. And at the same time, I am constantly getting emails from people saying, my friend told me, I'm new to town. My friend told me that I have to check out base. I'd love to come for a meal, or I'd love to come to a program. And that begins to happen organically, but it didn't start organically, right? Like it started from nothing. Now we have hundreds of people who are coming every year. But that didn't start that way. It didn't just like start with like people knocking down our door. And I'll say, somebody asked about measuring success. Like we are really, BASE is part of a national movement. And so BASE Boston gets to use some of the resources of our national movement. One of those is our CRM. So we use Salesforce to track all of our engagements. So if people come to a program, if I meet somebody for coffee, if I have a text conversation with somebody that's meaningful, if I have a social media interaction with somebody that's meaningful, I'm tracking it so that I can see, when was the last time that I talked to this person? Who haven't I seen in 3 months, who I had been seeing for a long time, that I should check in with and say, I haven't seen you. What's up? Like, you want to grab coffee and talk? And then almost always they're like, yeah, like there's been, I just went through a big breakup or something that's pulled me away. And I'm so grateful for being seen and for being like that builds so much trust and loyalty. And it like provides me with a lot of data. So like, I know how many people have come to our programs. I do measure success based on how many people come in terms of just like seats, seats filled, programming seats filled. We've had thousands of seats filled each year that we've run BASE. And by measuring how many people come back to multiple things. So like, we usually have like a 6 event threshold is like what our goal is, that people are coming to more than 6 events in a year, as showing that some kind of substantive connection to this community, that when they think of their Jewish identity or their Jewish community, they think of BASE or they think of KI. And so, we will have 70-80% of our 400 or 500 people who are coming to more than 6 things every year, and many of which are coming to much more than 6. But those are some of the ways that we can evaluate. And again, it's not only about evaluating like, are they coming to our programming, but how many touch points are we having with that person? How are they seeing me show up for them in their life? And how are they feeling seen and held by the community?
I learned not long ago that it's a wrong question to say, to be careful on how to ask the question, I haven't seen you in a long time. To how to say it in a way that is not shaming or blaming, because especially to us rabbis, like if I see someone in the supermarket, I haven't seen you in a long time, they're like, no, but I'm okay, I'm sorry, I was there for Yom Kippur, you didn't see me. Like there's all this guilt people have because I haven't seen them in a long time. And I mean, well, like I haven't seen you in a long time, but people might feel that is actually telling them you're not okay. So to switch the way you say, it's like, I'm so glad to see you. How are you? You're saying exactly the same, but you are not telling them, you're not making people feel guilty for not showing up. And I think that is part of what Rabbi Bonney-Cohen is talking about.
Totally. And also to reach out to them. I mean, I think that's, it's when you see them for sure, like, it's so good to see you, like, whatever, like reassure them, like you're not judging them. You're not like, they don't have demerits because they haven't been since Yom Kippur or whatever, but also to feel like, to be empowered to reach out to them and to say like, it's been a while and I would love to reconnect, like, I think that is, again, rather than, I love that, rather than being like, where have you been? Just to say like, it's been a while. Like, I know that things have been busy on my end. I would love to reconnect, and to own that goes both ways.
There's someone who's listed by a phone number, but they've had their hand up for a really long time. And I want to give them an opportunity to ask their question.
Yes, hi. My name is Michael Murphy. I'm the Congregation Bethel in Sudbury, and I am a millennial communion, 41 years old. And it's first of all, thank you so much for this program. It's been really great to even just to know that such a program exists. You know, I'm wondering though if it's also the fact that there's so many things that I've noticed that we need to just I felt like there's so many ways that not well understood misunderstood as millennial, but in terms of like just having questions about the fundamental structure of liturgy, the canon, you know, the just so much of what we believe. You know, I feel like, you know, what we have, there's, and I think this is speaking to what, why millennials are, you know, leaving the synagogue but not leaving Judaism. It's just that they don't want to be tied down to specific denominations and, you know, you know, party lines. Whether that's,
Excuse me, but is there a question here?
yeah, I just want to know if there's, I'm sorry, I'm trying to say, like, is there, some way that can be engaged by way of just more opportunities to teach about Judaism itself, you know, rather than having to say that you have to be a member before you even are allowed in.
Question, where can people learn?
No, it's not quite, but it seems like if you know, the only way to start the process is like with you know, what I'm saying is that it just doesn't seem to me like, you know, at least, and I know there's a lot of other congregations within the Reform movement, at least, that it just doesn't, it claims to be inclusive, you know, of everyone, but it really isn't, especially when it comes to, you know, your, you know, when you vary from the norm in terms of your ideology or even theology.
So is your question, how can we be more inclusive?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn it back to our panelists.
So I think it's so true that there's such an array of ideology, theology, even ways, you know, Rav Claudia, when you talked about social justice, for some people, that word literally makes them want to like run away. And for other people, they can't imagine a Jewish setting that didn't bring social justice into it. Obviously, I'm with you. But I think one of the gifts of Boston actually is that we have so many fabulous learning opportunities here for folks to learn with teachers from Hebrew College, with staff from 18 Doors, with programs from CJP. I mean, I feel like I could be a Jewish Boston poster child here. There are so many fabulous classes at different synagogues that people I know are welcome to join without being a member. Everyone is looking for more people to join Torah study, no matter where they teach. Folks are welcome to visit Shabbat services at any community. Some communities have different ways of welcoming different people, but generally in Boston, I believe, whether it's an intro to Judaism class or parenting through a Jewish lens, or, I run a couples cohort for couples, so does Rabbi Bonney-Cohen. There's conversion classes. There's just such an array for folks to do that learning. And I think that's really, we're so lucky to be in Boston, to be surrounded by CJP, which supports many of us to do this work. And certainly, I think, Gretchen, I don't know all of the programming for the Synagogue Council, but I'm sure too that I know that you guys offer a wide array, as do many other organizations. So I think that sometimes we land in Jewish communities because we live near them. Sometimes we land in them because we choose them ideologically. Sometimes we land there and we're like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Is it nostalgia? Is it guilt? What's it about? So I just want to offer that there are so many pathways into the various communities we have.
Thank you, Rabbi Gubitz. And it looks like we've come to the end of our time together this evening. I want to first thank our amazing panelists. Your experience, your wisdom, your sensitivity, your insights have been phenomenal, and I can't thank you enough for being with us this evening. I'd also like to give a brief shout out to 3 upcoming Synagogue Council programs. On the 19th of April, we're hosting a program, a deep dive into the voluntary contributions model. On Sunday, May 1st, the entire community is invited to the 19th annual Connie Spear Birnbaum Memorial Lecture featuring keynote speaker, General Amos Yadlin. That is available. It's a multi-access event available both on site at Congregation Beth El in Newton and via Zoom. And we have a workshop strengthening relationships between professionals and lay leaders. The informational workshop is on May 12th and May 15th. It's repeated on May 15th. Please go to the Synagogue Council website for more information and registration for all of those programs. Our website is www.synagoguecouncil.org. Thank you again to our panelists for everything. Words can't express my gratitude to you this evening. Thank you to all of our participants for the gift of your time. Toda Rabah. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy almost Passover.
Happy almost Passover.